Hello beer tubers and welcome to another beer review with me, Peter, the master of hoppets. Today, checking out some more beer from Croatia that I got courtesy of Dan, who's been supplying a lot of Croatian craft beers for the channel. So thanks a ton, man. He sent a few beers from some brewers he loves, and it started with Pivovar Medvedgrad because of the whole lager thing, but now he sent some other more modern stuff and some different stuff, some double dry hop lagers and other things. So this is a beer from Nova Runda, and they are based in Zagreb, and this is a collab with a metal band in Zagreb called ThroaTTwisteR. And he sent this one because he knows that I love West Coast IPAs, and this is a West Coast double IPA on 9% and 87 IBUs. It sounds like this is something that's going to tear your throat out. And the hops are a plethora of really classic hops for using in a beer like this. Although sometimes you'd see Columbus and not this one for bittering. I guess that's what it's for. But it's Magnum, Amarillo, Cascade, Simcoe, Centennial, and Chinook. So what I'm expecting is classic West Coast IPA, more old school. So let's check it out. Pour is a lightly hazy golden yellow, slightly orange color. What's interesting, a lot of people will critique haze in West Coast IPAs. But if you dry hop really heavily, it's really hard to get rid of haze. There's almost always going to be a little bit, but it will have more of that slightly clear hue to it. When I poured this out, the can was slightly soft, and it seemed like a lot of CO2 pouring out. I mean, I couldn't almost generate a head. And also looking at the beer, it looks a little bit still. Well, let's see. That's also why there's so much beer in the glass. I wouldn't pour out this much normally, but let's see how this. I really love the last beer I had from these guys, which was like more modernized, very hoppy Pilsner. Let's check out the aroma. Yeah, very old school West Coast for sure. Marmalady, orangey, tangerine, a little bit piney, a little bit spicy too. Sweet kind of bready malt, doughy maltiness. It has more sweet malt aroma and flavor than a lot of like the more modern ones. It has like that more robust malt profile. But it's interesting. It looks orangey, but yeah, I think there's something in here. Maybe it could just be a Munich malt or something to give it a bit of color. So you don't have crystal malt in your IPAs. IPA and crystal malts are not friends. Used to use crystal malts all the time in IPAs back in the day. But yeah, it smells nice. It's not like as, like vibrant and singy as some of the more modern interpretations. But I think it's also got something to do with the really low levels of CO2 in the beer, because that doesn't lift out the aroma. Well, let's give it a taste. Cheers, and thanks to Dan for the beer. Really, 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 really gentle CO2. It's almost like having a cask ale. And it's surprisingly, for 87 IBUs, it doesn't feel that bitter actually. Okay, here it comes. Sometimes it comes there lingering in the back. But yeah, it really lacks carbonation, I think. Really lacks carbonation. It's got a nice, like more classic West Coast flavors, but the CO2 level is just way too low. You want a West Coast IPA to be like snappy and like with the, maybe not as much as a Pilsner, but you want that like CO2 level to emphasize the hops and the dryness of the beer. And that's just really lacking. It's like, it's almost dead flat. You can see there's a small amount of bubbles in the glass, but it's not a lot. There is a touch of a modern flair to it with a slight bright kind of fruitiness, like citric, zesty kind of flavors. But otherwise, like it's lots of pine, lots of resin, grapefruit. There's maybe even a bit of like passion fruit or something to it, or pineapple. But it's pretty classic West Coast hop flavors, pretty much classic sea hops. With a grapefruit and the pine and the resin and slight earthiness and whatnot. And that's nice, but I just prefer the modern hop flavors in the modern West Coast beers. I prefer the really cool hops that we get in hazies, but then used on the West Coast canvas, I think it works wonders. And I think also with this one, it's also a double IPA 9%. The sweetness is maybe a touch too high for my preference. There's definitely a sweet kind of bready malt, almost like that. It's not really like, it doesn't really taste like there's a lot of crystal malt, if any, in there. But it's got like that almost like sugar coated breadiness. Like if you have a slice of bread with sugar and marmalade, like really sweet kind of breadiness, because it also has a lot of that like marmalade, orange marmalade flavor. But then the bitterness is kind of what's helps get rid of that a bit in the end, like because it has like a longing bitterness, but it doesn't feel overtly dry either. It feels like there's a decent amount of residual sweetness, but everything is also perceived with beers like this, because then it's lacking CO2 as well, so it's not, that doesn't make it feel too dry either. It's not a half bad West Coast IPA, but I've certainly had a lot that's better than this. I truly think so, and that's 100% honest opinion, even though, when I get beer from subscribers, it's so awesome that Dan sends me the can, but I have to be 100% honest. I always have to be. And I will say, like, it's nice, but this is not something I'd pick up again personally. It's like, it's just, there's a few too many factors that makes me think, eh. And I think their Pilsner was quite fine in terms of CO2 levels. Maybe it's just this one. It's just like, you can also feel as this warms, it will also get sweeter and a bit more sickly. And then you have all those resiny, sticky hop flavors paired with a sweeter malt backbone. And I just don't think that, like, it's just not for me anymore. I want more brightness, more singiness. Like, I want the likes of North Park and Slice and Shred and like Highland Park and Cellar Maker and all these brewers that make like a slightly more modernized interpretations of West Coast IPAs. That's kind of what I prefer these days. Although I do love a really fresh old school West Coast IPA once in a while. But speaking of just old school brewers, even like Russian River, if you listen to podcasts with Vinny, he talks about how he's changed plenty over the years with small steps. Like it's now like, just if you look at colors of original batches versus now, and hopping techniques, all these things, which is like, even like a lot of classic West Coast brewers are not exactly the way they used to be, because they want to innovate and push boundaries and become different and just become better. And it's funny because I think to a lot of people who's not follow what's going on in the West Coast, they think it's more something like this that's the main kind of West Coast IPA. Yes, it's still there, but most modern West Coast brewers are brewing something quite different to this these days. Not sweet, not really malty, not only C hops. It is heavy dry hops. It is, really crisp, really clean, light malt bases. Just like a pure canvas for hop flavor without the obstruction of yeast and malt. So that's pretty much the idea behind most of these more modernized West Coast beers. But it sounds like I'm trashing it a bit. I still think it's a tasty beer. I definitely drink this if I was served a can. But again, not something I'm that excited about. So in terms of a grade, I think something like an 85. It's not half bad. It's got some nice old school flavors. It's just lacking a bit on some parameters. To be honest, if you just think back, like recently I did a revisit to Torpedo and Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. They are more old school beers, but they're just more well constructed than this. And I'd actually rather drink those, and they're from much bigger breweries. And they're even more old school maybe, but they were just a bit better constructed. They were a bit more vibrant and whatnot. And I think maybe just the biggest problem with this beer might be the lack of CO2. That could be the biggest problem with it, but that's about it maybe. But yeah, again, have to be 100% honest. But thanks a ton anyhow for the beer. It's enjoyable. It's fun to try. Thanks a ton, Dan. It's not half bad. So yeah, we got some more. We got some lagers and whatnot from it as well. Check out, which will be fun. So yeah, if you guys had a chance to try Nova Runda's Throat Twister Double IPA, West Coast Double IPA, let me know what you thought of it. Thanks a ton again to Dan for the beer. As always, comment, subscribe, check out the Facebook fan page and Twitter and Instagram. Give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Ring the bell for future notifications about videos. And I'm going to say cheers. And see you guys in another beer review.